Welcome, everybody, to the Best of the Best podcast. I am your host, Maverick Levy, and before we go into the episode 0, I want to give 5 thank yous to people and companies that make this show possible. The first thank you is to all of you. I put out the first episode of the Best of the Best nearly 4 years ago, and since then, my life has completely transformed because of this podcast and because of all of you and your continued support for the show. So with that being said, I'm really excited to bring back a new format and an updated version to bring even more value to all of your lives. The second thank you I want to give is to our presenting and title sponsor, Brinks. You see the Brinks money trucks driving around, but they just released the Brinks Armored Account debit card. So a big shout out to the entire team at Brinks for joining on this journey with us. The third thank you I want to give is to a product that I also actually use because I do use the Brinks Armored Account debit card myself, is Pathwater. Pathwater, they are great. I love the taste of their water. Some people might say I'm crazy because I think water tastes differently than other water, but I love Pathwater, and they are the official beverage sponsor of the show. So thank you so much to Pathwater. The fourth thank you I want to give is to Surroundings Group. This podcast lives on the Surroundings Group podcast network. So thank you so much to the team over at Surroundings Group. And the fifth and final thank you that I want to give is to Ben Spiro, the producer of this show and the man behind the camera. You probably will hear his voice because we're going to do something a little bit different where if we're talking about something with the guest, he might pull it up on his computer, show us, and he's going to have a microphone some episodes. So you may hear his voice, but a big shout out to Ben. Now, if you're new here and you didn't know what the old podcast was, or if you're a former listener from the old version, again, thank you so much for being back. But let's talk about what this podcast is, because you might be wondering if you're watching. This podcast is an interview type of podcast where we cover all things in life, but we have an anchor and a big focus on financial literacy. So the reason that this show is called the Best of the Best is because what we want to do is bring on the best person in each industry and interview them so that all of you and myself, because I'm going to be learning alongside all of you, are able to gain a base level of understanding about whatever that guest is an expert in. So for example, if they're the expert in taxes, we're going to talk taxes with them, and we're going to learn about the basic level of understanding of taxes, how taxes work, different types, etc. So that's kind of what this podcast is about, but we'll go outside of the realm of traditional financial literacy. Maybe we'll have on an athlete, an influencer, a celebrity. To be honest with you, the reason I love being in creative control of this show is because I could sit next to someone on the plane and think, wow, this person is an amazing person at what they do. I want to invite them on the show and have a conversation with them. So again, our root and our anchor will be financial literacy, but we will go outside of that box to bring you true value, education, and also entertainment as well. And something that we have been doing while on hiatus from doing the Best of the Best, and as we've been revamping it, is figuring out how we can deliver more value to all of you. Because as you know, if you're a former listener, or if you didn't know and you're a new listener, we want to educate all of you, but also entertain you along the way. So what we came up with is doing 2 different episodes for each guest that comes on the podcast. The first episode is a short form rapid fire Q&A episode. So let's go back to the example of taxes. Let's say we have an expert on and we're talking about taxes. We're going to say, what's a W-2? What's a 1099? What does it mean when you file an extension? Why is April 15th an important day for taxes? And during that short form 25-minute episode, that guest will answer each question. We won't go off any side tangents, and we will just rapid fire Q&A. Now, the reason we're doing that short form is because we want you all to be able to listen to something that is short, but also concise and straight to the point, where if you listen to it, you have now built that ground level understanding of that topic. However, like I said, 2 episodes per each guest. And the second episode is a long format version of the podcast. What do I mean by that? Well, that episode is going to be 2 to 2.5 hours long, depending upon how the conversation is going. And that allows for me to not have to rush through questions. We can go off on side tangents. We can talk about their career, about their path, about who they are. I call this the Joe Rogan style of interview. You really see him being one of the pioneers doing long form content in the podcast world. And I love it because I think it allows for a fluid, honest, and natural, organic conversation. So again, two different versions. Short form, 20 to 25 minutes. Long form, 2 to 2.5 hours. Now, let's talk about where you can access the podcast. If you want to access the short form content, I want you to go to the maverickteams.com. That's the Maverick Teams, plural with an S.com. And on there, navigate to the best of the best tab, create an account, and that, once you create an account, is where you will be able to access the short form content. The long form content is going to live on all platforms, anywhere you listen to podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts. So again, you might wonder, why am I going to the Maverick Teams? What is the Maverick Teams? And why am I going there to access the short form content? Well, it's simple. The Maverick Teams is my consulting firm. It's where the umbrella company is for everything that I do. All the other ventures that I'm a partner in and a part of live underneath the Maverick Teams. So I want you to go there, not only so you can watch the podcast, but you can also check out what we do at the Maverick Team. So that is the formatting, the two different versions of the episodes, and where you can access them. Now let's talk about the cadence for a second. The cadence of the podcast is going to be one episode every 2 weeks. So an episode comes out, you'll have to wait 2 weeks for the next episode to come out. And during that time, right, we'll be posting clips on socials so that you can be informed and stay up to date as to what the next guest is or who's going to be on each episode, et cetera, et cetera. So make sure you go and follow the podcast on all social media platforms, or pick your favorite one and follow us there. It's at TBOTB Pod. That's the username. You can find us on all different platforms. Again, TBOTB Pod. Obviously, the acronym stands for the best of the best podcasts. And as we wind down to the last part of episode 0, I want to just give a big thank you again to everyone. I'll go through the 5 one more time very quickly. To all of you for supporting the show, to Brinks and Brinks Armored Account, to Pathwater, to Surroundings Group, and of course to Ben. So a big thank you to all of you for making this possible. And guess what? You just finished episode 0, and I'm going to see you on episode 1 of your favorite podcast. You might say, how do you know what my favorite podcast? Well, this is it. The best of the best. Thanks, everyone.